Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Chillaxing and Chit-Chatting podcast. Or if you're new here, I welcome you. And today I thought I'd do an interesting episode, talking about a topic that is more relevant from last month, but I still think is worth talking about. Um, and you might notice as well, that I've started putting up gameplay. I'm putting up Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare in terms of the gameplay I'm putting up here. And I thought for myself that it'd be much more visually nicer for you people who are perhaps watching the episode as well as listening to it to go ahead and just have some sort of visuals that perhaps are more appealing than just me talking with a microphone, be with not the most amazing kind of setup or anything. I tried making a better setup, but I think gameplay is probably better. And I want to talk about a topic, as I said, that's more relevant last month, but I think is still worth talking about because I think it's important to talk about it beyond just the month that celebrates or talks about it. So this episode's been recorded in July, and in June there was firstly Pride Month, I believe. So happy Pride Month. And then for another topic, it was also known as Men's Mental Health Week, which is to do with which I think is something very important to talk about for myself personally, and also I think important to just talk about in general. Um, so talking about men's mental health, I think is important to talk about mainly because I feel like with, you know, not just in the past, but even today, I think we are living in a culture where we are having to not have men talk about their mental health. And I'm saying this today because we're in a culture where, as well as in the past, this idea of toxic masculinity that men shouldn't cry, shouldn't get upset, or shouldn't be emotional, is also something that I think applies today because of the recent culture that we have, mainly to do with what's been going on as of late, where you have people such as the Andrew and Tristan Tate, the Tate brothers, who have created this persona that is now quite prevalent online. And because they are able to get the attention of people that are around my age or a bit younger, or people in their 30s, for instance, they can easily grab their attention because because they're rich people who have a load of money, they get a load of cars, and they film themselves with a load of women. And it's and putting aside also the criminal trafficking situation, but with the personas that the Tate brothers have had, their popularity is also a problem in terms of their popularity, in terms of their personalities, where the popularity to them that they have online, from from men is to do with this idea that you need tips on getting rich and everything, and on top of that, this idea that they don't perhaps say that men shouldn't cry, but what they do talk about is the idea about being a tough guy. This tough, masculine, very manly person who needs to be exercising all the time, constantly working hard, and working hard is important, but it's the attitude they have, not just to women, but also the idea and the persona of like shouldn't be crying, should be whinging or whining about it. And you shouldn't really be having these kind of mental health, probably ideas of depression. Andrew, the Tate brothers probably don't put on this idea of depression and that you should have it. And so therefore I think because of that, there's the sense that we have men not being talked about having depression, or perhaps it's just that it creates the idea that because we have to be tough, muscular people that keep exercising all the time from morning to night. In fact, there's probably those tutorials saying you have to get up at like 4 in the morning. But the thing is, you have this persona of that because of that, you shouldn't be worrying about how you feel mentally, that you shouldn't have to feel anything like depression, and it's not really talked about as much perhaps. And as well as that, I think what's also something you see online sometimes is this toxicity towards you know idea that men shouldn't feel depressed, or whatever, it's not really that important, which you see online, where it's like women can feel, and I'm not being sexist, I'm talking about this in terms of social media, that you have this idea that women can talk about depression, but the idea, oh, men get depressed, ooh, boo hoo, cry me a river, or whatever sort of thing. And it's important to talk about that. And I think because of that, and because of those topics I've addressed about the idea that these people like the Tate brothers or social media as well create this toxicity about men either shouldn't be depressed, or if they are depressed, they get made fun of. It then means then there can be an increase towards suicide, unfortunately. I should stress as well, there should be, I'll put up maybe a trigger warning, hopefully, just to say that this is going to contain topics that are quite sensitive. But I think but there's an increase, there's a percentage, there's a high percentage of men sadly committing suicide due to the mental health issues. And part of it does probably come from this idea that we obviously live in a world where technology and social media are such a prevalent thing that if you are around my age or just a bit younger or older, you will be seeing online this idea that you shouldn't be feeling perhaps depressed, or if you feel depressed, you shouldn't like really be feeling it. You should just focus on the mindset. But then there's people like there's men who perhaps don't get the opportunity to focus on that, or their mind isn't at work, or their mind's just not able to work on it. And then therefore they're not able, and also this creates this idea that they're perhaps scared to talk about perhaps how they feel and what goes on through their head. I think it's important to address that. And I myself sometimes wonder about, mentally speaking, where I am at in terms of my depression, if I have depression at all, because it's such a sensitive topic to talk about. And so I do want to address it with a sincerity and with care, and just be on the right sort of line talking about it, because it is quite a sensitive topic, and many people I know will go through that. And for myself mentally as well, my idea is that sometimes, quite often, how I feel is that I will think, I see from friends or people around that, how they're feeling and their mental health. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm not going through depression or going through any mental health major struggles because I don't have it as bad as other people do. Other people have it worse, other people having much more suffering. And I think as well as that, because of that, when I am opening up, there's this worry that I have in my head that I am this burden, that this sense that I'm putting all this like problems and struggles onto me, and I keep whining, and I might be seen as a whinger whining about it, which is something that if you are feeling that way, you shouldn't feel that way. And I'm talking a little bit to myself, saying you shouldn't feel that way, because you should be going ahead and addressing it, and you should be talking about it. If your friends perhaps or family members are saying you're a bit of a burden or anything, you should go ahead and tell them, or criticize them. Or if you have a friend saying that, they're not really being your friend, I would say, to go ahead and support you if you are feeling like a struggle, if you are going through struggles. What they should do is keep supporting you throughout difficult times, and if they are, then it's a friend right there and there. But if they're not, I would say that that's not really a friend. That's a shallow kind of level friend that, they'll be happy with you having fun or whatever. But then if you're upset, it's a problem. And that's also another thing as well, which is something that I imagine also happens in work and retail, this idea that you need to constantly be happy, or you get this toxicity of people who will constantly just be happy or want you to be happy, and then they'll be annoyed or angry that you are feeling sad or upset or whatever, and then you're felt as a downer or a mood breaker. Basically, you're bringing the mood down, and I think you shouldn't be having people acting like that towards you at all. It's just not right at all, and it's something that is important to also talk about with mental health and with men's mental health. The idea that you should go ahead and talk about, you should also think that not every day you're going to feel happy, and you shouldn't bring this toxicity of wanting to be happy. I mean, I put on this persona of being happy constantly. And there's the well-known thing about comedians, perhaps, or the idea that the people who bring out the most laughs to people, might in their heads be unfortunately the saddest people out there. I mean, an example of that is the comedian Robin Williams, who was a comedian that was known to constantly make people laugh and bring joy to people, to so many lives, not just through his stand-up comedy, but the joy coming from the roles he played on films and TV, such as even in dramatic roles like Good Will Hunting, where he is a bit of a therapist to the character of Will Hunting. And there's a great scene, for instance, of him saying to Will that it's not your fault. And it's those simple words that causes Will to break down crying, but it's the words that he probably needs talking to say that, you shouldn't feel responsible for some actions that you had nothing, that you had no responsibility with, you had nothing to do with. Uh, and the sad thing about Robin Williams is that um, he committed suicide, and he was going through before that issues throughout for several years to do mainly with drinking and drugs, and that is and I think it does wonder, it does beg the question if someone does commit suicide, the question of would it be right if they did talk to someone, would it change their life or not? And it's something that perhaps it could change someone's life, but maybe it won't be enough. That's the tricky part, really. And but I do think that if you are struggling with mental health and you are like me, a young man living in the world, you should talk to people, and it's you should open up not just to perhaps family members, not just to perhaps women you know in your life, but also to men in your life. And if you open up to them, it'll be good and quite healthy to open up to then let out basically the struggles that you have. I know I've had people, friends that I have opened up to in terms of how I feel and perhaps some struggles that I'm going through in life. And it does help out because I do hope for some advice and I do get that, and it does genuinely help to have that. And I think having Men's Mental Health Month is important and key, not because it's just for that month, because I think it should be explored constantly. But I think with that month, at least it then is great to have it as a moment to just, it's similar to other months. Why do we just have a Pride Month? Why not throughout the year? Well, it's because those months are just key moments to just remind people, oh, yeah, we need to talk about this or we need to address these issues. With men's mental health, it's good to have that month as a reminder to say, oh yeah, we need to maybe not only address and talk and about people, what my mental health struggles are, but also perhaps talk to someone, some other guy that you know, like a friend or a boyfriend or anything like that, and just say, how are you feeling? Is there anything? And ask that genuinely, because I will say one of my pet peeves that I have personally is is when someone asks, are you okay? It's like, yeah, I'm doing all right, sort of like that saying. And I say it myself, and I don't personally like that because I feel like quite often that's not always the case. You can say you are genuinely doing okay, but I just don't like it in terms of that casual sort of thing of that repeat. To me, it's almost akin to a record just constantly on a loop saying, yeah, I'm okay, yeah, I'm okay, yeah, I'm okay. I think it's also good to basically answer that and actually say, genuinely, how are you? How are you? Really, how are you? How's everything going for you? How's life? And if how are you at the moment? And genuinely, how are you? And I think it's good to address that and to actually say something beyond the sort of instinct in your brain that will say, okay, repeat the same thing over and over again. I do think that it's important to go ahead and say, genuinely, how are you? How are you actually feeling? And I think with men's mental health, it's beyond just, as I saying, feeling depression or feeling suicidal thoughts. Mental health can also apply to several other aspects as well. It can also apply to something else, like, say, for instance, body dysmorphia, anorexia, not just in the depression of how are you feeling in terms of life around you, but the depression of physically, how are you in terms of how you look at yourself physically. Body dysmorphia being an example of just how some people, men, for instance, will look at themselves and think, I'm ugly, or perhaps I'm getting fat or overweight. I need to get myself skinny, or I need to get myself muscular. And that's especially true with a culture where the gym is great in terms of mental health. And I do use that as a good thing to actually help myself out and to also, in my mind, to think to myself, I'm feeling great for myself and I'm feeling good. I'm actually, I'm exercising, keeping myself healthy and fit beyond just in my sort of room, my bedroom, which is my comfort sort of area. But also as well with gym culture, you see those pictures of men, for instance, taking pictures of themselves in the mirror and they showcase off their body and everything, that's muscles. And then you perhaps might get this idea that you need to feel muscular, or perhaps you're not perhaps pushing your weight enough, you're not pushing dumbbells enough. And if you're in the gym, for instance, you can just go and look at some guys who are big, muscular, big boned guys, and you shouldn't go ahead and look at that and then feel the sense of jealousy or think that you should be looking like that. And plus, it takes a lot of time to do that. So if you're going to the gym for the first time, don't ever think about like that. And in fact, you can probably look around the gym and see other people who perhaps aren't the biggest or most muscular or the skinniest people out there, and they could very well be having their first time at the gym. And I think what we should do at the gym is be respectful to people. You can mind their own business, and just think, to them, if it's their first time, well done to them. Just think, well done to those people. And as I mentioned, with my room being kind of in my comfort zone, I've had moments in my life where, mentally speaking, I felt I'm in my room constantly. And, last year, for instance, I'm doing, I think, better this year because last year I was in my room a lot of the time and I was trying to get work within the industry and I had struggled to deal with that. And so I thought, man, I graduated from university. I'm just in my room, just, just doing my 9 to 5 job sort of thing, doing my usual job at retail. And I want to move away from that. And, I want to go ahead and I need to find some work within the industry after graduating, and I'm struggling to find that. I just thought, I'm seeing other people perhaps from my year at uni, and they're finding work as a runner on television productions and everything, and I myself aren't. And I just thought, man, I'm just this like loser living, just staying in my room constantly and mentally being in my room create this effect of me feeling like I was a loser or perhaps I failed a little bit, that I just graduated from university and it got me nowhere sort of thing. Well, I've decided not to go I'm not going anywhere into my future within industry, but I've been reassured by people that I've had, it takes time. And also I've been told by other colleagues from uni that, it is a bit of a struggle at the moment finding work within the industry. And on top of that, this year I have helped find some level of work. And so I think mentally speaking, I am feeling a lot more healthier. And in fact, yesterday at one point or a couple of days ago, I did think to myself, I'm doing quite well for myself, actually. I'm doing a load of different things, as well as, going ahead and as well as going ahead and going ahead and finding work with industry. I still continue to upload as on my YouTube channel, not like constantly, frequently, but I do upload eventually from time to time, and I as well as sit around and play video games, watch movies and TV shows. I will do that as well as also help out with screenings in some capacity, and yeah, I do several different things in my life that as well as going to the gym as well, keeping that up as much as I can. And yeah, and I also might do some reading at some point as well. So I keep myself going, I keep myself moving, and I think it's key to do that. And also, I think talking about mental health, it's a bit funny. Well, not funny necessarily, but it's kind of nice that a month before that, in the month of May, we had the release of Thunderbolts as well, which was a Marvel movie that dealt with mental health that I think would be relatable to a lot of people, the sense that you perhaps relate to some of the characters, and in a way you can relate to these characters who are seen as failures or people who have done many bad things and many regrets. And then the movie's message of to keep moving forward and to not constantly look at the past, and that you can find a way to redeem yourself is also key and important, and something that I think people need to address and say to themselves. And also, answer the question to themselves, perhaps, are you all right? And then think to yourself and talk to yourself, saying, think to yourself, are you actually feeling all right? Is there perhaps something there that you're noticing and you're not too sure what it is, perhaps? Or maybe perhaps you do know what it is that's hidden in the back of your mind, and that it'd be good to maybe open up towards that. So I think it's important in several capacities with mental health. And I think, if you are struggling, you can comment below about it, and I will respond to that. And I will talk about just how it hopefully, if you are feeling or struggling, there are ways to help out beyond just websites or sources out there. There are friends and family, that at least someone out there in your life that would be willing, I'm sure, to talk to you in some capacity. Find a way to talk to you. And if you aren't, try and you can follow me around on social media perhaps, or comment below, because there will be some way for you to find some person out there who hopefully can care about you. And if you are struggling, I hope you do find a better, if you do get better and that you do feel better. Beyond just that, I hope you find something that it showcases. And if you are perhaps struggling, feeling like you are a failure, do not feel that way. There are ways to redeem yourself. And I think with Thunderbolts, as good as that, as nice as that is, it's also key to not look and focus on to say like Hollywood or young people out there, or people out there who started out in life pretty young and immediately started becoming successful. Do not go ahead and compare them to you. Don't think of that. There are, was it billions of people in the world, and there are many people out there that are like you that will find success later on. And even then, you can take a look at some of the examples of people out there who did not immediately find success, but found success later on, including perhaps those in Hollywood or celebrity actors or just celebrities in general who became successful not immediately out of the gate. And so I hope you understand that. And I hope that if you are a man going through mental struggles, go ahead and search up and open up to people because that will generally help you out. It will get the thing off your chest, and there will be people that will tell you that who will reassure you that eventually you will be okay. And hopefully you will find peace and hope. And maybe if you are struggling or failing, you will find redemption in life. So with this episode, I also wanted to review quickly, but not do it very long and extensive like I've done before, some reviews of some Doctor Who audios from Big Finish as well. And one of them I want to talk about is kind of linked to the topic of Men's Mental Health Week because this one stars an actor who I really, really like and appreciate. He's also someone that did struggle with mental health, including when he was working on Doctor Who, and he addressed, his mental health struggles in his autobiography, which I recommend you take a look at. And that is Christopher Eccleston, the actor who played the Ninth Doctor in Doctor Who and helped bring the show back in 2005. And he mentioned in his autobiography, I Love the Bones of You, which I do recommend. It's a really terrific book. I love The Bones of You, which talks about him and his relationship with his dad and also the struggles he's had mentally. And he, I mentioned body dysmorphia. Well, Eccleston did suffer through body dysmorphia, and in fact, there's an episode of that he was in called Dalek, where in that episode of Dalek, he was being tortured in one scene, and he has his shirt off, and so you see the top half of his body, and he looks very skinny. And some people might think, oh, he looks quite skinny there, and he looks pretty fit. To him, he looks at that with a bit of shame in a way, or he looks at it with a regret, and it's a bit difficult to watch because it's at the time when he was going through body dysmorphia, anorexia, and so he was struggling with his body image, and so he struggled looking at himself. Yeah. So regarding Eccleston, he left the show in 2005, and there was an episode he was in Dalek where, as I said, he's being tortured by one of the characters, and he's got his shirt off, so you can see his top half, and he's very skinny in that scene. And some people might look at that and think he's quite fit, but he looks at that with regret in a way, and it's difficult to watch because he was going through anorexia and body dysmorphia, so he made himself really, really skinny, and unfortunately it caused him to have anorexia. So it's and he's also and I'm saying this as well because it was on his book, so it's not me being like some tabloid exploiting him. He did have suicidal thoughts, and so he struggled mentally quite a lot over the years. And with Eccleston, he struggled quite a lot mentally, and so because of that, with the mental health that he was struggling through with Doctor Who, it's one of the reasons why he left, and partly one of the main reasons as to why he had declined for several years to return to the role. However, in 2021, during lockdown time round, he decided to come back for Big Finish audios, and thankfully he enjoyed working on the Big Finish audios with the scripts available and the cast. He enjoyed it so much that he went back to playing the role of the Ninth Doctor. And in that episode, and in the Ninth Doctor Adventures, I'm reviewing the third box set, Lost Warriors, because I've already listened to the first two, which are Respond to All Calls and Ravagers. Ravagers being the first one, and that one was a story that had a collection that had three audios that were completed together into one main story. And that one main story was a solid adventure that provided a nice kind of, mainly the highlight being obviously Eccleston just coming back with great enthusiasm. But the second box set, Respond to All Calls, was the really good box set. It's one I've listened to several times, and it's a really good box set that set the template for what the future of the Ninth Doctor adventures were going to be, where you have the Ninth Doctor on three separate audios that are three separate stories, with the connection being that he is encountering is that he has the connection being an ongoing theme instead of an ongoing narrative. The ongoing narrative from Ravagers, but yeah, that was in response to all causes an ongoing theme. And that theme in The Lost Warriors is each of the people that the Doctor encounters in the three stories are lost souls or warriors. These are warriors who have fought in perhaps conflict and wars, and they're lost souls who thankfully get help from the Doctor. And the main one on the cover art, as you'll notice, is the Cybermen, and that was the main selling point for this audio. Where this audio's main selling point was that the Ninth Doctor finally encounters a full-blown Cyberman. The only time he encountered on screen was a one in Dalek that was just a helmet of a Cyberman. And you have a story that and that's the third story in the box set known as Monsters in Metropolis by John Dorney. And the second box set is also one, the second story in this box set was one that also intrigued me, which was The Curse of Lady Macbeth by Lizzie Hopley. However, the first story, The Hunting Season by James Kettle, was surprisingly my favorite of the three. And it's because I think of the story itself, and also one thing that it mainly had that the Ninth Doctor audios probably don't address as much, which is the Doctor fighting in the Time War. It's not outright said about the Time War, but the Doctor does have talks from other people that he is thought of as a warrior or a soldier, and that is a really interesting topic that gets addressed in a really solid story that also has a really interesting kind of plot thread in terms of the twists and turns it takes. And the setting is quite nice as well. And the interactions with the cast and everything is all really well handled. The script by James Kettle, I just think, did a really nice job. And I think that overall, surprisingly, it was my favorite. It's the one I was most enthusiastic about by the end of that story. I just found myself really gravitating to that one. And to be honest, it was a major shock for me because I personally was interested in the other two stories. The second one, I was interested because I myself am I do like Macbeth, but the story and Eccleston, did Macbeth on stage not a couple of years ago, and so he has a bit of an association with that story. And so you'd think it would be a really, really good story. And I think the story was good, but I do think that it was the weakest one. It was the one that gravitated me the least. However, the main thing that it did have that was quite good was the dialogue. It felt very fitting for the time period and not really modern in terms of the way the characters spoke, beyond the Doctor, of course. He's someone who goes throughout time and space, but the other characters spoke as if they were in that time period, including, for instance, Neve McIntosh, who you'll know as Madame Vastra from Doctor Who, the Silurian, who's part of the Paternoster gang, who plays Lady Macbeth and does a really solid job as the character, and the setting is quite nice. It's just, I think, with the story, the monster in question isn't that interesting. So because the threat and the monster isn't that fascinating, the story perhaps doesn't gravitate me as much. Not nearly as much as, say, the Hunting Season, where you have an alien group that is fighting against a human group in a very unique sort of time period that also adds with the Ninth Doctor being mentioned as being a warrior that I think was much more interesting. And then you have the other two story, and so and then you have the third story, which is Monsters in Metropolis by John Dorney. And I know this one was the one that got the most amount of praise when it came to this box set, mostly because it's not just because it's the Cybermen story. A lot of people thought it was a really well made Cybermen story. And I would say that for me, I found it to be um, uh the second best. Not as good as the Hunting Season, but it still was a nice story, and it was still a quite a good story. It had a really cool setting for someone who's into film, because you have here a Cyberman who is replacing the robot that is used for the set of the movie Metropolis, the very famous science fiction film that a very famous science fiction film. And instead of the robot that you know from Metropolis, this woman, this gigantic robot woman, I think, the Cybermen is taking over instead. And the Cybermen being used is used in a very interesting way, because it's not just beyond the Ninth Doctor finally encounters the Cybermen. What I like about John Dorney's script is that you have a Cyberman that is able to have some depth beyond this cold, calculated person who's been converted into a Cyberman. You get some depth and development to it. That means then goes beyond. That means then Big Finish, we're not just gonna go ahead and be like, right, we've got the Cyberman with the Ninth Doctor. Let's just make a Cyberman Ninth Doctor story. We have something much more than just that. And I think that's what makes Monsters in Metropolis a really solid story, and one that also means then it's just a terrific Cybermen story that I personally did not love, but I do think it has got a lot of merits to it, and it'd be one I'd be happy to listen to again. And I think with the other two stories, I would also definitely listen to them again, but for different reasons. The hunting season I'd listen to again because I really liked it, whereas Curse of Lady Macbeth, I want to be able to maybe listen to it again to get a better maybe understanding of it, because I don't know if I click with it as much. But overall, I would say that this is another solid box set in the Ninth Doctor Adventures, and I think because there's been so many Ninth Doctor Adventures box set, there's been less passion for me and so many people when it comes to the Ninth Doctor Adventures, saying it's cool and all Eccleston's come back, but we want to have more than just box sets with Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor, have something interesting behind it. Plus, also there was the Once and Future story he was in, Time Lord Immemorial, which I wasn't a big fan of. So I kind of lost a bit of love and passion for the Ninth Doctor. But then when I listened to the hunting season, it got me back to that passion of the Ninth Doctor. So I'm now wanting to go ahead and dive into the next box set, which I will at some point, and I will let you know my thoughts on it. But for this box set, I'd say I definitely would recommend it. And I think the thing is with the Ninth Doctor box sets, most of them, except for the next one, Volume 4, Old Friends, which I'll talk about in my next episode, they're mostly standalone, so you can definitely listen to them in any sort of capacity or order. So that will be very interesting. And I'd say with the Knife Doctor Adventures, I would they're all standalone mostly, and so I would say out of the three I've listened to so far, the second box set, Respond to All Calls, is my favorite. But this one is another good one to pick up maybe after you've listened to Respond to All Calls, because that is still the standout box set out of the three that I've listened to. And for another Big Finish box set that I will be taking a look at, it is one starring a doctor that I've always really liked, and I've been watching his stories on screen at the moment in terms of my classic Doctor Who run, and that is the third Doctor, John Pertwee, who I'm a big fan of. And since about 2015, Tim Trelaw has been providing the voice of the Third Doctor for the Third Doctor Adventures box sets, which originally started out as mostly just starring him and Katie Manning reprising the role of Jo Grant, because she was sadly the only actor in the companions for the Third Doctor that's still with us. But eventually they've expanded to include companions Sarah Jane Smith and Liz Shaw, the Third Doctor's companions from season 7, his first season, and season 11, his final season. And you've managed to get, and they've managed to do it in a respectful way where they get the daughters of the actors who played Liz Shaw and Sarah Jane Smith to to play the roles of these companions. And the box that I'm taking a look at for the Third Doctor Adventure stars Liz Shaw, who's played by Daisy Ashford, the daughter of Caroline John, the actor who played Liz Shaw. And the reason it's season 7 is mostly because I've actually watched all of season 7, and I've actually got round to taking a look at this audio known as Doctor Who and the Brain Drain. Now, firstly, that's a great title. It's very much keeping in tone with not just the Target novels, which I'm pretty sure had that Doctor Who and the blank, but you also had that as a it's also in reference to Doctor Who and the Silurians, the second story for the Third Doctor. And the thing is with that name title as well, the title also in a way um, matches with Doctor and the Silurians, because this story is, I think, Big Finish going the earliest in the Third Doctor's life up until at the point they've done the Third Doctor audios. This is the earliest they've gone into the Third Doctor's timeline, Big Finish, because this is a story that takes place after Spearhead from Space, but before Doctor and the Silurians. So it's an interesting kind of timeline sort of thing. And because of that as well, you have the Third Doctor, getting accustomed to working for UNIT. But also, as well as that, you also get a nice little kind of joke or reference to Bessie, the Third Doctor's car, because in Speared from Space at the end, he's asking for the car that he drove to UNIT, which was this red car that he stole. That was obviously someone's property, and the Brigadier says, you can't, own that car, but he wants a car like that. And in this story, in this audio, you have the start of him saying that he liked the car to be in yellow, which of course is a reference to Bessie, and that's quite a fun little nod. But it's not. But this is a story that isn't just full of nods. It's a really fascinating story written by Richard James and also written by Nicholas Briggs. I believe James wrote the first kind of bits of the script, and then Nicholas Briggs would help him out. And being that it's in line with season seven as well, this is a seven-parter, so it's quite a long story. And I would say that I don't know if it justifies the length because this was good, but I didn't absolutely love it. Um, it's not on the same kind of level as other season seven stories, but it's a pretty interesting kind of story in terms of the structure it has, and also in terms of how you get moments where you won't have the third Doctor for a while. You'll instead get the Liz Shaw and the Brigadier, and thankfully the cast are solid. You have Daisy Ashford as Liz doing a really solid job portraying her mother's character, and you also have John Coleshaw, who's a terrific impressionist who does a really good job as the Brigadier. And then with this story, you also have the story focusing on I believe Peter McLeod, who is this figure, who's this person who's presenting this fascinating machine that's going to go through the minds of people and also in a way cure Alzheimer's. And it's a story that, and so I think with that topic, it actually does kind of match up with what I've been talking about this episode to do with mental health. And, you know, mentally, the obviously dementia and Alzheimer's is a terrible thing that it's one of the worst things that people can go through. And actually connecting that with the Ninth Doctor, or Christopher Eccleston rather, Eccleston talked extensively in I Love the Bones for You about his dad, and that his dad went through dementia and it was a very difficult thing. And it's a story, and because of that, it means then this story has quite a maturity and something very interesting to focus on. That I think was quite a fascinating topic, and it means then that the supporting players that are for this story alone are a pretty good supporting cast, and it provides a story that does experiment a little, not with just the structure and also the sound design as well. When the machine's being used, or when the main person of Peter is communicating in a way with someone that is important to him in his life, and it's part of the reason why he's making the machine. And also, if you're a lover of Scotland, which also Curse of Lady Macbeth, Ninth Doctor Adventures box set, that was set in Scotland, and this is also set in Scotland. So there's a couple connections, but with these Big Finish audios. But as I said, I would say that this is a story that overall wasn't amazing, but still an interesting story. And I do appreciate that Big Finish were doing something that perhaps was a bit experimental, and that they're not just going to go beyond let's pay tribute to the Third Doctor era. Although they do that very nicely because the music that is used in this story is really darn good. Because I believe the music isn't from previous Third Doctor audio for Third Doctor stories like from on screen. They are new music, but it's new music that works really nicely in matching kind of in matching with the Third Doctor soundtrack, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if people would think that these were tracks from previous Third Doctor audios. It's pretty darn good stuff. And so as I would say, it is a darn good audio, but it's not my favorite. And I do think that, maybe perhaps there might be some better options for the Third Doctor audios, but I still found this to be a pretty solid entry. And it was pretty nice to listen to it and also have my own thoughts and opinions on a bit because I decided not to really um check out reviews from like Mr. TARDIS, for instance, on this audio because I want to dive into this myself and have my own personal opinion on it because I feel like maybe my opinion might be different or the same. I'm not too sure. And I bought this and it was released in February of this year because I thought it'd be quite cool to purchase a Third Doctor audio that was new Big Finish audio that had come out only a couple months ago. So it's fairly new and fresh. So, and it's not too expensive, but if you want to perhaps go for a better Third Doctor story, there might be better options that are also cheaper. But if you're craving for something that's like a seven-parter, season seven kind of story, you've listened to a couple of Third Doctor and Big Finish, then this would be not a bad option to go for. And the last box set I'm going to take a look at is one that I own myself. And I mean that in terms of that I own it on CD. I don't just own it on download. And it's the 12th Doctor Chronicles, Volume 3, You Only Die Twice. Now, for those who aren't familiar, the Doctor Chronicles is a series that's been going for a couple of years at Big Finish, where they basically, this was more for the revival of Doctor Who, where it's a range that basically allows for stories to be told within the new eras of Doctor Who in the revival, but without using the actual actors of the show, or at least the main Doctor actors. So this is before Eccleston got cast as the Ninth Doctor, and also would be used when David Tennant wouldn't be available for 10th Doctor audios. And this also is applied to the 11th and 12th Doctor. And recently, I of course took a look at the 11th Doctor Chronicles Volume 1 Geronimo, and then also Volume 2, actually, Geronimo, not Volume 1. And with that Volume 2 Geronimo, it was Volume 2, but it was really the start of a new series of box sets where you had the 11th Doctor travel with a brand new companion. And the 11th Doctor is played by Jacob Dudman, who is a terrific impressionist, and he's great with his 11th Doctor impression. And he does also a pretty darn great job as the 12th Doctor. And I also took a look, as you might be aware, the second volume in the 12th Doctor Chronicles, known as uh Time Jacked. Actually, just scratch that. I think Geronimo, the 11th Doctor Chronicles, was volume 3. My apologies. But anyways, volume 2, Time Jacked of the 12th Doctor Chronicles, had a similar thing where the 12th Doctor was traveling with a new companion, Kira Sandstorm. Kira Sandstrom, played by Bavanisha Palmer, who is best known probably to you as the actor who played Yasmin Khan's sister in the 13th Doctor era. And her character was a really nice rookie time agent that provided an interesting kind of dynamic with the 12th Doctor, where she was in an adventure with the 12th Doctor that was fun, time hopping, but also at the same time had a lot of substance that mainly comes from the arc that Kira goes on in terms of being an evolved, mature character. And also, there was a great amount of twists and turns in the story that made it a very engaging listen. And that came out quite a number of years ago. And in between, and after that came out, the 11th Doctor Chronicles were releasing a full series where the 11th Doctor traveled with a new companion, Valerie Lockwood, played by Sophia Ingar, I believe. And but then in 2024 in March, there was the return of Kira Sandstrom and the 12th Doctor. And I think this will be the last time that these two will be paired up, at least for a while, because this was the last box set Jacob Dudman was doing for Big Finish, because he's doing other work in his career. And so this, along with the Time Jacked and the 11th Doctor Chronicles series he did with Sophia Ingar as Valerie Lockwood, it would be the kind of the last farewell for Jacob Dudman. And thankfully with Big Finish, they didn't just go, let's make some fun little adventures that matches the style and tone of these eras. With the 12th Doctor Chronicles, You Only Died Twice, we have another box set that is also really darn great. And I'm not just saying that because also the second story in this audio CD happens to be written by someone who I know, who's a bit of a friend of mine, Ben Teds, who's a really nice person and a great writer who wrote for the 12th Doctor and Big Finish before, because he wrote The Best Laid Plans, a short trip that was a winner of a competition, Paul Spragg Memorial competition, I believe it is, which is honoring Paul Spragg, who was a major contributor and a major person in Big Finish who passed away sadly. And to honor him, Big Finish decided to go ahead and put his basically go ahead and honor him by getting anyone to write up a Doctor Who story that would be part of the short trips range, and the winner would get it would have their story released by Big Finish, and it'd be available for free to listen to. And the thing is, there's probably some really good stories. I've only listened to the Best Laid Plans, but it is a really solid story. It's one of my first things I got when I got a Big Finish account. And being that he has written for the 12th Doctor, it was in pretty safe hands for him to write up a story like this. It was pretty safe hands for him to, I felt like we were in pretty safe hands for Ben to write up a story such as You Only Die story in this box set. But the main difference is that unlike the short trip where you had Jacob Dudman narrating the story, this is a full cast story that Ben is writing. And I'll take a look at that at some point. But before I dive into his one and to their one, I'm going to look at the other ones, Georgia Cooks and Theo Trethewey. So the first story, Sunstrike by Georgia Cook, gives you kind of the feeling of what this box set from the cover art and also the title gives you this sort of vibe of, which is, it feels a bit like James Bond. This is like the 12th Doctor being plunked into a James Bond story. And Sunstrike by Georgia Cook is very much like that, where you have the 12th Doctor and Kira dressed up and disguised as these made up sort of villains, pretending to be villains for this little area, this place where villains bid on weapons, dangerous kind of weapons, and it gives this fun little vibe to it. But also at the same time, there's a great scene that showcases that with Alfie Shaw, who's the producer of this CD, as well as the 11th Doctor Chronicles, that he's a great producer in terms of being able to give emotional, moving moments along with some fun feels and vibes as well, which showcases that these are great examples of how to do fun box sets and stories because you have more than just let's entertain people, let's also give them something beyond that that has a lot of substance and depth to it. There's a great scene where Kira is trying to almost go and save someone who's going to get killed, and the doctor says, well, we can't really because we have to stay in disguise in character as these villains. And that I think is a really great scene there. And also I'm quite pleased with that scene and throughout the story that you do get Kira being a bit more mature in the story. And that's what I hoped for in the sequel, where you had Kira being more mature and also more knowledgeable, I suppose, with being a time agent and what it means to be a time agent. And it's a really and Dudman once again I think does a great job as the 12th Doctor. I think he really gets the voice down quite right, especially in the quiet moments where he's quite low tone with the 12th Doctor. That's when you get a really great sense of this sounds very much like Capaldi. And the second box set, and I don't want to give too much away, but the second one, Never the End Is, which is Ben's story, is a really good story that works mostly on its own, aside from the start and also the end, where the end has a really good cliffhanger, where I won't give much away. But with this story, you have a story that mostly works standalone in a way. And I think part of the reason for that is also, funny enough, even though it's the middle chapter in the box set, it was the first one to be written, as it was said in the behind the scenes. And that I think was really, really fascinating in terms of that being the first one. Um, but it works, and I think it works as a really nice kind of almost, in a way, it's almost Halloween or Christmas, I'm thinking, with the sort of cold weather sort of feel of it in a small little like village where there's this demonic presence that's haunting this place. And it provides a really great story for the Doctor and Kira. And also, there's a nice supporting cast surrounding it as well. And it made for, I think, a really engaging story that I had a really good time with. And what was great about it was that Ben was able to, I think, able to write a story that that was able to work with a full cast because, as I mentioned, with his short trip, he just had narration that was telling the story. That was a different kind of story structure. But here, it feels just like it works well. It works well, and it also just feels like this is someone who fits well within other Big Finish writers who have seemingly written for several full cast audios. It doesn't feel like this is a first time, really, and it works. But and so that shows you just, I think, in my opinion, the talent that Ben has, and also the talent goes to Georgia and Theo because they both also did a really nice job in providing stories that were different as well. With George's one is a really great comedic kind of story that also has some, as I said, one moment, for instance, that showcases a bit of a moving moment as well. And I think it was a great setup towards this box set as well. Um, and then you have Theo's story, which is the titled story, You Only Die Twice. And the name reason for that, for the name of the title, I won't really give away. And also what's great is the description where it says this time it's personnel. And yes, I said personnel, not personal, which I think is quite fun. And with that story and with You Only Die Twice, it's a bit where in that section you get a sense of the history behind the time agency, which I quite liked, that you got an expansion of the time agency, which is really, really cool. And that was really great. And it also wraps up the story very, very nicely. And it also, as I said, there's a bit at the end of the second story, Never the Endings, which I won't give away, but the way that that ends is something that was very unexpected. And with the story Never the End Is, overall, there is the demonic presence I said, and the revelation is that it's to do with, not giving much away, but it is something to do with the past that Big Finish have covered in terms of Doctor Who. And the good thing is that I didn't know what it was really. I hadn't encountered it before, but it works still on its own. And I think that was really good. And We've Only Died Twice as a third concluding chapter to this box set. It does a great job of concluding this box set and as an overall story from the start to finish in terms of the Only Die Twice, the title story by Theo. Theo does a really good job in terms of you get this expansion to the time agency, and also when that twist happens in the second story, it then leads into this story, and this story deals with that twist beyond just, and it does it in a way that works. It works emotionally for the characters. So it's not just the second story ends with a shocking twist. That then has ramifications, and that then leads to some emotionally interesting moments where you get some great performances with Dudman and especially Benicia Palmer. And as I said, I won't give away, but yeah, especially with Benicia Palmer, who is really solid in this story. And as is the whole cast as well. And the overall box set was just a really solid, polished box set that I'd be happy to listen to again, along with also Time Jacked. I think both the 12th Doctor box sets were really darn good. And I think with Jacob Dudman, this being his last one he's done for Big Finish, I'd safely say he went out on a very nice high. Now, admittedly, I have not listened to Victory of the Doctor, which is the final story in the 11th Doctor Chronicles final box set he did. And I know that that has a lot of praise, and most people rate that as the best Big Finish box set, well, best Big Finish anything from 2024. So obviously that may be a bigger high, but I still think this was also worth listening to. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd recommend it, although I would recommend you listen to Time Jacked first. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode of the Chillaxing and Chit Chatting podcast. For now, I'm going to wrap it up. And I hope you had a good time with it. And I hope you enjoyed my discussion on men's mental health. And I hope you also thought the gameplay was pretty solid with Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, being with my childhood that I still play at the moment. And I hope this was a nice change of pace to the Chillaxing and Chit Chatting podcast. I'll still review Big Finish, but not as much. And I thought I'd go ahead and wing through these box sets, but also give you good thoughts and in-depth analysis on them. And yeah, they're all available on the Big Finish website to listen to check out, so I'd recommend you listen to them, especially the You Only Die Twice. I think that might actually be my favourite of the three, although Ninth Doctor Ventures is good, as is Doctor in the Brain Drain, but that one is the standout for me. Though, as I said, listen to Time Jacked first. And I hope you also enjoyed my discussion on men's mental health, and I hope that I provided an interesting discussion and a hopeful discussion. In case if you are struggling with mental health, I hope I may have helped in some capacity. And if you are new here to this podcast, I hope you liked it and enjoyed it. You can comment on down below, and also go ahead and check out my playlist at the end of the video, which will have segments of reviews of other Big Finish audios, and also a playlist that showcases my there might be a place for that, or there's a playlist probably of the rest of the episodes. And yeah, all I can say is thank you for listening or watching, and remember to stay chillaxing and always keep chit-chatting.